The quiet of an autumn afternoon had settled over Milford, a small town in the Midwest. In a residential neighborhood just off Main Street, a red brick library glowed warmly in the evening light. Inside, Emily Parker was quietly organizing books. Her movements carried the calm confidence of someone who had worked in this place for many years. Emily's hands moved with practiced ease, stroking the spines of books and placing them in their proper locations. Around her, local residents quietly enjoyed reading. Both elderly people and children naturally smiled at Emily. It was clear that she was beloved in this town. The library had become Emily's most peaceful sanctuary. "Emily, thank you as always," called out Martha, an elderly woman. "The book you recommended was absolutely wonderful." Emily smiled gently and replied, "I'm so glad you enjoyed it, Martha. We're expecting new books to arrive next week, so please look forward to that." When the clock struck 5 in the afternoon, Emily closed the library and headed home. The Parker house was located in a residential area about a 10-minute drive from the town center. Thanks to the success of her father Robert's construction company, the family enjoyed a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. The two-story house with white siding and a blue roof seemed like the epitome of a typical American home. As she opened the front door, she could hear her mother Linda's voice from the kitchen. "Welcome home, Emily. Dinner will be ready shortly." "I'm home, Mom," Emily replied, but there was a certain distance in her voice. She walked through the living room and headed upstairs to her room. Robert was sitting on the sofa watching the local news. He seemed aware of his daughter's return, but they didn't exchange greetings. "Emmy, something interesting happened at the beauty salon today," her sister Sarah called out as she rushed up the stairs. Sarah worked as a popular hairstylist in town and was always bright and sociable. In contrast to Emily, she had good relationships with the family and had grown up receiving special affection from their parents. "What happened?" Emily asked dutifully. "I mastered a new coloring technique. It looks like I'll have lots of new customers starting next month. Mom and Dad are so pleased too." Sarah's eyes sparkled. Emily smiled, but her expression seemed a bit lonely. She had felt like an outsider in her own family for a long time. She knew that her profession as a librarian was seen as having little value by her family. When dinner time arrived, the family of 4 gathered around the dining table. Robert talked about events at the construction site, Linda chatted about neighborhood gossip, and Sarah enthusiastically shared success stories from the beauty salon. Emily quietly continued eating, occasionally nodding in response. "Emily, why don't you share something?" Linda asked. However, her tone didn't sound genuinely interested. "Nothing particularly noteworthy happened," Emily replied modestly. "It was just another peaceful day." "Well, I suppose every day at the library is pretty much the same," Robert muttered with disinterest. The conversation returned to Sarah's topics, and Emily retreated back into silence. She had developed a habit of avoiding conversation with her family and retreating to her room as soon as dinner was over. Alone in her room, Emily opened her diary. There she recorded her true feelings, the subtle distance from her family, the sense that she alone was excluded, and her complicated feelings about her approaching birthday. Her birthday was just over a week away. The next morning, Emily opened the doors of the library at 8 o'clock as usual. The Milford Public Library, though small, was an important cultural hub for local residents. Emily had been working there for 10 years, and the library could hardly function without her. "Good morning, Emily," her colleague librarian Margaret greeted her cheerfully. "Yesterday's children's story time was very well received. The mothers were praising you." Emily's face brightened. "Thank you, Margaret. When the children are happy, it makes me happy too." During the morning, local high school students visited for research. Emily guided them to appropriate resources and gave them advice on research methods. The young people were grateful for her extensive knowledge and kindness. Ms. Parker, thank you so much. Thanks to you, I think I can write a good report, one student bowed deeply. You're very welcome. If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to ask, Emily replied warmly. During lunch break, Frank, a retired former teacher, came to play shogi. He and Emily had made it a habit to enjoy shogi every Wednesday. Emily, I always wonder why such an intelligent woman like you doesn't get married, Frank said while moving a piece. Emily smiled wryly. My family says the same thing. But I'm satisfied with my current life. Perhaps your family doesn't understand you, Frank showed his keen observation. You're a special person. If there are people who don't recognize that, perhaps the problem lies with them. Emily was moved by Frank's words but didn't respond. In the afternoon, women from the local reading club gathered. They highly valued Emily's book selection skills and looked forward to her monthly recommendations. The novel you recommended, Ms. Emily, brought me to tears, one member said with emotion. You truly understand the human heart. Emily was loved and respected at work, but by 5 o'clock when she left the library and headed home, her heart grew heavy as usual. When she arrived home, Sarah was chatting happily on the phone with friends. In the living room, her hairstyling award trophies were proudly displayed. Welcome home, Emily, Linda called from the kitchen. You look tired today. Is library work really that demanding? No, it's not, Emily replied quietly. My goodness, getting tired just from organizing books. Look at Sarah, she stands all day cutting customers' hair, yet she's always full of energy. Linda's words carried unconscious comparison. When Emily tried to help prepare dinner, Linda shook her head. It's fine, you're not good at it. Last time your vegetable cutting was terrible. Emily said nothing and headed to her room. As she climbed the stairs, she could hear Robert talking to someone on the phone. My older daughter? Oh, she arranges books at the library. Well, it's like a hobby. The younger one is the really useful one. She's independent as a hairstylist and already earning well. Emily stopped in her tracks. Learning that her father spoke about her this way made her heart tighten. She quietly entered her room and closed the door. The next day, Emily felt unwell. She had a headache and mild nausea, with no appetite. At breakfast, she modestly mentioned her condition to her family. I'm feeling a bit sick. I might come home early today. Being dramatic again, Sarah said with a laugh. Emmy always makes too much fuss over little things. Even when I'm feeling a bit unwell, I work hard for my customers. That's right, Linda agreed with her daughter. You're young, so minor ailments can be overcome with willpower. Robert didn't even look up from his newspaper, muttering, it's not serious enough to miss work. Emily said nothing. Even during work at the library, she didn't feel well, and her colleague Margaret worriedly spoke to her. Emily, you look pale. Are you all right? I'm just a little tired, Emily tried to smile, but it was weak. Don't push yourself. You can leave early if necessary. Margaret's kindness touched Emily's heart. After work, Emily visited a small clinic in town alone. She didn't even consider consulting her family, knowing they wouldn't understand anyway. In the clinic waiting room, Emily looked around at the other patients. Seeing people accompanied by family members made her feel a little lonely. After the doctor's examination, she needed several tests. The results will be available next week. Please come back then, the doctor explained kindly. Emily nodded but had no intention of telling her family about the test results. They had never shown interest in her health. When she returned home, Sarah was looking at new hairstyle magazines while chatting happily with their parents. I'm going to compete in the state hairstylist contest next month, Sarah reported joyfully. Wonderful. Robert clapped his hands. Our family's pride. Such a daughter to be proud of, Linda said with pleasure. Emily quietly finished dinner and retreated to her room early. Alone in her room, she looked at herself in the mirror. There was a haggard-looking 34-year-old woman staring back. She took out an old video camera from her desk drawer. She had bought it years ago but never had occasion to use it. Emily picked up the camera with a look of determination. Emily stared at the calendar and sighed deeply. Her family didn't seem to remember her birthday, just like every year. Emily's birthday arrived quietly. That morning, she woke up to her alarm as usual. Outside the window, the autumn air was cold, and the street trees were dyed golden. While brushing her teeth in the bathroom, Emily whispered softly to herself in the mirror, "Happy birthday, Emily." The emptiness of celebrating herself spread through her chest. When she went downstairs, her family was having breakfast as usual. Robert was drinking coffee while reading the newspaper, Linda was cleaning up in the kitchen, and Sarah was checking her hairstyle in the mirror. No one mentioned her birthday. "Good morning," Emily greeted, and the family responded mechanically. The day at the library was fulfilling as always. Her colleague Margaret had brought a small cupcake. "Emily, happy birthday," Margaret said with a warm smile. "It's modest, but let me celebrate with you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "Thank you, Margaret. I'm truly happy that you remembered. Are your family members planning any celebration?" Margaret asked innocently. Emily smiled bitterly. "Nothing special." Margaret's expression clouded. She might have sensed something about Emily's home situation. In the afternoon, regular readers took turns wishing Emily a happy birthday. In the small world of the library, Emily was definitely loved. In the evening, Emily headed home with heavy steps. She had received a call from the doctor saying they wanted to discuss the test results in detail next week. She sensed something serious in the tone. When she arrived home, Sarah was talking excitedly with their parents. "I passed the preliminary round. I can compete in next month's finals." "Wonderful." Robert applauded. "Let's have a special dinner tonight. Linda, let's open that expensive wine." "I'll do anything for Sarah," Linda said happily. Emily quietly went upstairs and changed clothes in her room. No one showed special interest in her return. No one remembered it was her birthday today. Or rather, they might have remembered but didn't think it was worth celebrating. At dinner time, wine and cake were prepared on the dining table to celebrate Sarah. Ironically, it was the cake that should have been prepared for Emily's birthday. "Tonight we celebrate our genius hairstylist, Sarah," Linda led the toast. "Sarah is truly talented," Robert said proudly. "In contrast, Emily is." His gaze turned to Emily. There was coldness in his eyes that could be called contempt. Emily should be more realistic by now. At 34, just arranging books at the library is pathetic. Emily continued eating quietly, but intense emotions were swirling inside her. Today was her birthday, yet her family was celebrating her sister. And she was being belittled in that very moment. "That's right," Sarah said without malice. "Emmy should have more ambition. She should carve out her own life like I do." Linda nodded. "Sarah's right. Emily, you should be more proactive." At this rate, what?" Emily asked quietly. Robert put down his wine glass. The sound echoed strangely loud. "At this rate, you'll remain someone no one needs for the rest of your life." The air grew heavy. But Robert continued. "To be honest, Emily, having you was the biggest mistake of my life. Those words pierced Emily's heart like a knife. However, her expression didn't change. The composure built up over many years supported her. Linda agreed with her husband's words. That's right. Do you understand how much burden you place on this family by being here? Sarah added insult to injury with a laugh. Big sister is just a burden. Honestly, why don't you just leave? Everyone would be much happier. At that moment, something snapped inside Emily. However, she didn't shout or break down crying. Instead, she stood up in deep silence. I understand. Emily's voice was surprisingly calm. The three family members looked up at her. I understand, she repeated. I'll do that. What do you understand? Robert frowned. I'll leave, Emily answered simply. As you all say, I seem to be a burden to this family. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Linda said in a flustered manner. We didn't mean immediately. But Dad said having me was the biggest mistake of his life. Sarah said I'm a burden and should leave. Mom agreed with that. Emily's voice remained calm. That was... Sarah started to say, but Emily raised her hand to stop her. No, you're all right. I think so too. Emily slowly walked toward the stairs. Her family watched her go with stunned expressions. Back in her room, Emily quietly took out a suitcase from her closet. It was old, unused for over 10 years, but still serviceable. She mechanically folded clothes and packed them in the suitcase, selecting only what was truly necessary. She picked up a family photo from a picture frame but ultimately didn't put it in the suitcase. Instead, she took out the video camera from her desk drawer. She fixed it on a tripod and pointed the lens at herself. When she pressed the record button, a red light began blinking. Emily sat in front of the camera and took a deep breath. Then she began speaking through her tears. The camera faithfully recorded her confession. After recording for about 30 minutes, she removed the tape, put it in an envelope, and placed it on her desk. At 2 a.m, when all family members were fast asleep, Emily quietly left the house. She put the house key in the mailbox and left a short letter. Thank you for everything. As you wished, I'm leaving. I pray that this house will be happier without me. Thank you. Emily. The cold autumn night wind hit her cheeks. Emily walked away pulling her suitcase without looking back. Her shadow, illuminated by streetlights, stretched long and eventually disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, Robert was the first to notice. Emily's not here. Linda and Sarah also checked frantically, but Emily was indeed nowhere to be found. Her room was orderly, as if no one had ever lived there. Reading the letter left on the table, the three finally understood the gravity of the situation. Remembering the previous night's conversation, each showed complex expressions. I never thought she'd actually leave, Sarah murmured. Maybe we went too far, Robert was also confused. A month had passed since Emily left home. The Parker family's daily routine seemed to have returned to normal on the surface. Robert was absorbed in his construction company work, Sarah was busy preparing for the hairstylist contest, and Linda spent time on housework and social activities. However, all three felt a subtle unease about Emily's absence somewhere in their hearts. Shall we clean up Emily's room soon? Linda suggested at dinner. We can't leave it like that forever. That's right, Robert answered indifferently. She's probably not coming back anyway. I'll help too, Sarah said. There might be some of Big Sister's clothes I could use. The next Saturday, Linda entered Emily's room alone. The room remained orderly, unchanged from a month ago. The bed was neatly made, and the desk was tidy. It was as if Emily had just stepped out temporarily. Linda opened the closet and began organizing the remaining clothes. Emily seemed to have taken only the bare minimum, as many clothes remained. Looking at old sweaters, skirts, and photographs from her school days, nostalgic memories came back to Linda. Little Emily had been such a quiet and gentle child. Before Sarah was born, Emily was Linda's best companion. She often helped her mother and never forgot to be grateful. When did Emily become like an invisible person in the family? While organizing the desk drawers, Linda's hand touched an old videotape. The tape in an envelope was handwritten by Emily, to family. What is this? Linda picked up the envelope. After some hesitation, she called Robert and Sarah. The three gathered in the living room and inserted the tape into an old VCR. When the screen brightened, Emily's image appeared. However, her expression was different from the Emily they knew. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks gaunt, clearly unwell. If you're watching this video, it means I'm no longer in this house, Emily's voice echoed through the room. The three gasped. Emily on screen continued, speaking through tears. Dad, Mom, Sarah. First, there's something I must tell you. Last week, I had tests at the hospital. The results were... Emily's voice trembled. Terminal pancreatic cancer. The prognosis is 6 months at most. Linda's hand covered her mouth. Robert leaned forward, and Sarah almost stood up from her chair. Why did I keep quiet? Emily continued. Because I didn't want to worry you. And because I didn't want to spend my final time in family conflicts or pity. On screen, Emily tried to smile while wiping away tears. But hearing your words at tonight's dinner, I've made up my mind. I was indeed a burden to all of you. So, for the last time, I'll do as you wish. Robert's face turned pale. He was remembering the words he had said, having you was the biggest mistake of my life. Now he was beginning to understand how much those words had hurt his daughter. But there's something I absolutely must tell you at the end, Emily's voice became gentle. I love all of you. I remember Dad carrying me on his back walking through the park, Mom nursing me when I had a fever, and Sarah sleeping on my lap when she was little. Tears began flowing down Linda's cheeks. During my 10 years working at the library, I met many people. They all taught me the importance of family bonds. That's why I wanted to say thank you to my family at the end. Emily stood up from her chair and approached the camera. Dad, you were strict, but you taught me responsibility and diligence. Mom, you taught me the importance of kindness and compassion. Sarah, you showed me the courage to pursue dreams. Sarah began crying aloud. Big sister. If I could be reborn, I'd want to be your family again. Next time, I'll try harder to be a better daughter and better sister. Emily's voice became hoarse. Finally, I have a request for all of you. Please cherish each other. I only understood how precious it is to be family when I became ill. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So please treasure this moment. Emily on screen bowed deeply to the camera. Thank you so much. I was happy to live as your daughter and big sister. Please take care of yourselves. I love you all. With those final words, the video ended. Heavy silence filled the living room. All three couldn't find words. Eventually, Linda began sobbing. What were we doing? Linda covered her face with her hands. When our daughter was suffering from illness, we were. Robert sank deep into his chair. Tears welled up in his eyes too. I said it was the biggest mistake. I said that to her. Sarah sat on the floor, crying violently. I told her she was a burden and should leave. When big sister might be dying. The three began sharing memories of Emily. Little Emily had indeed been lovable, the family's treasure. When did they start taking her for granted? When did they stop seeing her value? We must find Emily, Robert stood up. And we must apologize. But where is she? We have no clues, Linda said through tears. We'll definitely find her, Robert's voice carried determination. We cannot lose our daughter. Not like this. The three talked through the night about ways to search for Emily. They listed every possible place: hospitals, friends, former colleagues. The next morning, they began a desperate search. However, Emily seemed to have vanished without a trace. A week passed, then 2 weeks. Anxiety and regret weighed more heavily on their hearts each day. The videotape was replayed many times, and each viewing brought deep pain to the three. For the first time, they began to understand how precious Emily had been. After 3 weeks of desperate searching, the Parker family finally located Emily. A social worker at the State General Hospital had contacted them. Emily had been using a false name, but Margaret, her colleague from the library, had happened to see her and contacted the family. The sound of 3 sets of footsteps echoed through the hospital corridor. Robert, Linda, and Sarah hurried toward the 4th-floor room, out of breath. When they heard the nurse's explanation, they learned that Emily's condition had already deteriorated considerably. Opening the hospital room door, they found Emily lying there, emaciated. Her appearance was so gaunt that she looked like a different person from a month ago. The three were speechless. Emily, Linda called her daughter's name with a trembling voice. Emily slowly opened her eyes. Seeing her family's faces, she smiled faintly. You came, Emily's voice was weak but warm. Robert rushed to his daughter's bedside and knelt down. Emily, forgive me. I was the worst father. His voice shook with tears. We watched the video. Linda also took her daughter's hand. We finally understood how much you loved us. Sarah collapsed, crying at her sister's pillow. Big sister, I'm sorry. What horrible things I said. Calling you a burden. Emily touched her family with her weak hand. It's all right now. Just having you all here is enough. Why didn't you tell us? Robert asked painfully. We could have supported you. I wanted to spend the final time loving each other, Emily answered quietly. Not in conflict or pity, but as a real family. For the next several days, all 3 members of the Parker family stayed at the hospital with Emily. They took turns holding Emily's hand, sharing old stories, and expressing their love. Emily listened to her family's words with a peaceful expression. Dad, Mom, Sarah, on the final night, Emily looked at her family and said, I'm glad we became a real family. The next morning, Emily quietly passed away. It was a peaceful end, watched over by her 3 family members. People from all over town gathered for the funeral. Library users, former colleagues, and local residents shared memories of Emily. The 3 Parker family members learned for the first time how many people had loved Emily. After Emily's death, the family changed greatly. Robert revised his company's management policies and introduced systems that valued employees' time with their families. Linda began volunteer work visiting lonely elderly people in the community. Sarah, as a hairstylist, began providing free services to people in need. 1 year later, in autumn, the 3 Parker family members stood before Emily's grave. The headstone was engraved, "Beloved daughter and sister, Emily Parker, forever in our hearts." Emily, we won't forget the true love you taught us, Robert spoke to the headstone. Thanks to you, we were able to become a real family, Linda said while placing flowers. Big sister, I will become someone who treasures people, just like you, Sarah vowed through tears. The autumn wind blew through the cemetery, and from the direction of the library Emily had loved, came a sound like pages of books being turned. The three joined hands and quietly vowed to walk into their new lives with gratitude for their daughter and sister. Emily had taught her family in the end that love is not something you realize after losing it, but something you express in this very moment.